So thanks a lot. That is really encouraging. If I look at participant numbers, we have more than 200 participants already. Numbers are still growing. I think this is a good reflection of the interest that there is out there in the work on the network code and demand response. I extend a warm welcome to you also on behalf of my co-chair, Fabio Genovese from Terna. My name is Tristan Nob. I'm from E.ON. I'm from the DSO side. Fabio is from the TSO side, and we co-chair the development team. We would like to, in the second workshop, give you answer your questions, of course, but also give you a further understanding. Well, in the first part of the period for the public consultation, so that you maybe better understand what is meant by the different rules, and that your replies to the consultation can be even more fruitful for the further development of the network code. Maybe we can have the next chart, please. We will structure this workshop basically into two parts. The first part is that the 4 subgroups, the work is structured into 4 subgroups, will each for 20 minutes provide an overview and explain the decisions they made, the crucial points that they see, and also tell you where they would most love to see your input coming in as part of the public consultation. The first part is, of course, about market access mostly. You see that it's Paul de Witt and Zhao Dao. The second part is about pre-qualification. It's Georg and Philip presenting. The third part is mostly about market design. That's Yvonne and Olivia. And then the fourth part is mostly about TSO, DSO coordination, but also about network development and data exchange requirements. That's Daniel and Robert. After that, we around 10:30, we will then, or probably the subgroup members, leads, will then address your questions. So I would encourage you to already put your questions in the chat. Maybe we can also have the next chart already. Put your questions in the chat, even while the different subgroups are presenting. Maybe they will be able to pick up something during their presentation, but we'll all come back to your questions that there are in the session at the end. So the basic idea is, first we try to communicate to you what we think, what our decisions have been, what is our perspective. Then we already collect what you have, and then we'll try to answer your questions in the last session. We'll see how many unanswered questions there will be. This could, of course, be the case because the time is limited, and then we'll find an appropriate way to come back to these. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to that. And as I said, it's really encouraging to see now we are 265. Fabio, you would like to introduce where we are and why we do all this.
Yes, good morning from my side as well. Fabio Genovese representing the TSO side, co-chairing with Thorsten his new network code. I think it's a good moment also to remind everybody, the whole audience, why we are doing this. Of course, you might remember that following the entry into force of the clean energy package, namely the electricity regulation, there are, of course, descriptions how a process should look like for new network code development. And in fact, the DSO entity and ENTSO-E have been tasked to develop such a new network code specifically on demand response. What is the overall aim? Of course, it's not just about demand response, because this is wider and refers to, in a technology agnostic way, to the integration of distributed flexibility in both transmission and distribution related services for the overall benefit of consumers, and of course contributing to decarbonization goals. How do we do this? Of course, by simplifying the market access requirements, such as registration, pre-qualification procedures, the definition of aggregation models, by establishing principles for the market design for congestion management voltage control services, by facilitating the standardization of products for these services, at least at national level, and by enhancing the cooperation framework between TSOs and DSOs, so that we can ensure access to the necessary data from each other and also from grid users to operate the system. We really think that with the wave of distributed resources that it's incoming, we've seen it also in the last 12 months, but it will increase further. We think this is a huge opportunity for us as grid operators, of course, to make grid operation more efficiently, more secure, but also from you as the consumers to make your electricity bill more affordable. because by participating and offering you flexibility, of course, this will have a direct benefit also on your side. Broadly speaking, this network code will be complemented by national terms and conditions, and their development through common proposals, so common meaning by TSOs and DSOs, is part of the perspective that we call system of systems. There is, of course, one big power systems, but within this power system, there are different systems, transmission systems, distribution systems, and we think this holistic view together and developing this together is part of this perspective. On the next chart, a quick reminder about the overall process, when we can expect what. I take a step back again. In 2020, you might remember the European Commission established a priority list for areas which could require new rules. Demand response was one of them. Then in 2022, ACER was tasked to develop framework guidelines. They were consulted, then put forward to us. And finally, this year in March, the EC tasked the DSO entity in cooperation with ENTSO-E to draft a new network code. We have 12 months for this, meaning that in March 2024, we should be done. So we are halfway in the process. That's why we're consulting. That's why we're meeting today. And after wrapping up, after our submission, it's in the hand of ACER and the EC finally. So with this, I think we can move on to the first topic in the first subgroup. So I will hand over the word to Zhao and Paul.
Morning, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my name is Giardo. I work as European Affairs Officer in ENTSO-E, the French transmission system operator. I co-lead the subgroup 1 with Paul David on the drafting of 2 titles. The first one, general provisions, and second one, general requirements for market access. So the title 1 deals with the general and legal provisions of this new regulation. This regulation establishes a network code which lays down the requirements in relation to demand response, including rules on aggregation, energy storage, and demand curtailment rules to contribute to market integration, non-discrimination, effective competition, and the efficient functioning of the market pursuant to Article 59.1 of Regulation 943/2019. The requirements set out in this regulation shall apply to TSOs, transmission system operators, to DSOs, distribution system operators, regulatory authorities and other designated entities, to ACER, the Agency for the Cooperation of Energy Regulators, and the 2 associations, ENTSO-E and EU DSO, to third parties to whom responsibilities have been delegated or assigned, and other market participants, including customers and resource providers for demand response, including low storage and distributed generation, whether aggregated or not. The Articles 5 to 8 describe the whole process to develop, approve, and amend the national terms and conditions, we call that TCs. For the first step, the system operators shall jointly submit to the competent national regulatory authority by 3 months following the entry into force of this regulation, a proposal for a national process to develop national terms and conditions. So, and then Article 9 to 12 describe the whole process to develop, approve, amend, and publish the union-wide terms and conditions and methodologies, TCMs. In this part, this is ENTSO-E and EU DSO entity, the 2 associations, who shall develop the union-wide TCMs in case the relevant monitoring report produced pursuant to Article 77 in this network code, called harmonization, identifies the need for harmonization. The 2 associations then shall submit them for approval to ACER. Then Article 13 and 14 describe the conditions for the public consultation for national TCs and union-wide TCMs, which shall last for a period of not less than 1 month. Then in the article 15 on stakeholder involvement, it's written that the agency, in close cooperation with EU DSO entity and ENTSO-E, shall organize stakeholder involvement regarding secure system operation and other aspects of the amendments and implementation of this regulation. Such involvement shall include regular meetings with stakeholders to identify problems and propose improvements, notably related to the areas covered in this regulation. Then, the Article 16 describes the condition for delegation and assignment of tasks entrusted to system operators. The Article 17 describes that the costs borne by the relevant TSOs and TSOs subject to network tariff regulation shall be assessed by the relevant regulatory authorities. The Article 18 is about confidentiality obligations applied to any person subject to the provisions of this regulation. Now, I will leave the floor to Paul for the aggregation model chapter.
Thank you very much, Zhao. Well, my name is Paul de Wit. I work for the Dutch distribution system Alliander. Specifically for the aggregation models, it has been a long journey to find a good way of defining and finding the right balance for describing the models. We also had special workshops with the stakeholders in the drafting committee on this topic. Lengthy discussion on this, I can tell you. The pictures that we use are a simplification of the models, and this helps a lot in better understanding the models and describing what we mean. And so we think, but it's only a simplification of it. Just to be clear, we are talking about explicit flexibility. So no, not implicit flexibility, flexibility which can be traded by using controllable units or flexible resources. The separation of flexibility and supply is also very important here to mention. The supply is done by the supplier, and the aggregator or the service provider is steering the flexibility resource or controllable unit. That's very important to make that distinction. If you have multiple suppliers, that's a little bit out of the scope of this network code. The aggregator or service provider is only responsible during the activation of the resource, and also many discussions on whether or not the aggregator should have its own BRP or not. But eventually we came to the conclusion that these are the basic models. As I mentioned, the interaction between the supplier and aggregator is very crucial here. Whether or not the flexibility resource is isolated, meaning separately measured with a submeter or DMD, I will come to that later, makes a lot of difference, specifically for the risks of both BRPs and suppliers and aggregators or service providers. So that leads us more or less to the conclusion that the most significant part of for the models is the measurement or isolation of the flexibility. Also very fundamental, of course, to measure flexibility, you need a baseline. So if you want to measure the flexibility at, in this case, the home, you should have a baseline of the home. And if you measure the flexibility of, in this case, the EV, you need a baseline for the EV or controllable unit or flexible resource. So the delivered flexibility is the difference between the baseline and the measurements, both at the connection point or at the controllable unit, in this case the EV. So, as I mentioned, this has led us to the conclusion that there are two basic models that we describe, which can be seen as simple building blocks, which can be used in many different configurations. First, we have model A, and model A, there the delivery of the service can only be validated for comparing the baseline of the connection point with the M1 measurement. Here the M1 is the measurement of it. When there is no activation, the supplier and BRP1 is responsible for what is measured at M1. So that's simply the supply of energy. During the activation, BRP2 takes over, or the aggregator and BRP2 takes over, and then the flexibility is the measurements of M1 minus the baseline of M1. So that's the delivered flexibility. If you can isolate a flexible resource like an EV with a separate submeter or a DMD, then the DMD is a direct measurement device, which is proposed in the electricity market design by the European Commission. It's not yet in active legislation, but we already incorporate it in our proposals. So the flexibility can be measured by using a submeter or a dedicated measurement device. And the delivery of the service can only be validated by comparing the baseline of the flexibility resource with the measurement, either M2 or the DMD. And the fact of having two different metering points, measurement and connection point, and the flexibility resource, enable to unambiguously assign the imbalances to the relevant parties. That's very important here. When there's no activation, the BRP1 and supply 1 is allocated the volumes of simply the M1 meter, and during the activation, the flexibility resource is separated from the connection point in this case, where the BRP1 is the measurement M1 minus the M2 or DMD volumes minus the baseline. And when there's during the activation, the delivery of the aggregator and BRP2 is what is measured at the difference between the baseline of in this case, the EV, and the measurements of the M2 and DMD. So those are the two basic models, Model A, non-metered flexibility resource, and Model B, the metered flexibility resource. We also have the part of this part is also the financial compensation. Just to be clear, this is between the service provider and the supplier. It is optional. In the directive, electricity market design directive, it is stated that the member state it's up to the member state to decide whether or not a financial compensation is applied. And when there's a financial compensation applied, it can be a regulated price, a fixed price, a specific formula, or a bilateral agreement. It's a very difficult topic for us also because it is between the service provider and the supplier, so we really depend on the opinions of the stakeholders in this case. So input on this part is very much appreciated, also on other parts, of course. And for Article 24, we describe the basic data exchange rules per process step. Here, maybe it's good to mention that specifically for a DMD or an M2, we still need a metadata administrator for it. And that's a way to make sure that the information is accessible for all parties. I think this is, I hope I did not take too long. Usually this topic takes long in all the discussions of the network code. So I would like to give it back to Zhao to continue with the rest of part 1.
Thank you, Paul. I think it's okay. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yes. So for the rest of chapter 2 of this title 2 about baseline, the network code establishes that different baselining methods can be nationally implemented and applied. To enable innovation of baselining, new methods can also be proposed by the service provider, by the DSOs, by the TSOs, or third party. The national thesis on the definition, calculation, and validation of baseline methods will describe the process to apply the data to share, the process to support innovation, and the publication of accepted baseline methods. By 5 years after the entering into force of this regulation, ENTSO-E and the EU DSO entity shall make a common assessment which considers costs and benefits of whether further standardization of baselining methods brings benefits in achieving the aims of the electricity regulation. And in this process, the two associations shall consult the stakeholder and shall consider their feedback. About settlement, the system operators shall establish a settlement procedure at national level for the local services if not already existing. The network code provides the requirements on the necessary data exchange between the relevant market parties and the system operators to activate and settle a local service. And with regards to imbalance resulting from the service activation, the imbalance of any balance responsible party not responsible for the allocated volumes of the asset or the BRP of the service provider shall not be affected by the provision of a service operator system, of a system operator service. And pursuant to the national thesis, the imbalance settlement will be proceeded. And now, on the last article of this Title 2, the network code requires the reduction of bid granularity of standard balancing bids in order to facilitate participation of smaller resources in balancing services by means of aggregation. That's all for our part. Thank you very much. I give the floor to our colleagues.
Yeah, good morning. Philipp Meyer from the German TSO Amprion. I am responsible for the subgroup that deals with pre-qualification, together with my counterpart from DSO side, Georg Hartner. Yeah, before we dive in the pre-qualification title, we deemed it useful to present firstly the different object levels that we use throughout the legal text. So in total, we have 4 different object levels. The object with the smallest granularity is the technical resource. That is an individual power generating module as defined in the RFG, or an energy storage or a demand unit or any other consumption device. And the next level is the controllable unit. And the relation between the controllable unit and the technical resources is determined by the controllability. So if multiple technical resources are commonly controlled, then these technical resources form together a controllable unit. That is also depicted in the examples at the bottom of the slide. So on the left-hand side, maybe a medium voltage example, on the right-hand side, a low voltage example. So as you can see, there is a wind farm on the left-hand side, and these individual wind generators, they can only be commonly controlled through this wind farm controller. So these three individual plants, they would form a controllable unit, as also indicated by this color code. And on the right-hand side, for instance, if we have a look on the household, on the left side, there's an energy management system controlling different technical resources. So for instance, a heat pump or a fridge and so on. And this energy management system is the controller for these technical resources. And the technical resources cannot be individually controlled by a service provider. So that's the physical reality, so to say. These controllable units can now be utilized by service providers to create service providing units or service providing groups. And the only difference between these two objects is the number of connection points. So if controllable units behind the same connection point are combined, then it is a service providing unit. And if controllable units from different connection points are combined into one object, then we are speaking of a service providing group. And the service providing group and service providing unit are those objects that participate in the service markets. So the service provider would apply with service providing units and groups for certain products and undergo the pre-qualification process and so on. Okay, next slide. Yeah, let's come to the pre-qualification, to the actual pre-qualification title. In general, in our view, and as drafted in the legal text, pre-qualification can be differentiated into three subcategories. The qualification of the service provider itself, so the qualification of the legal entity, then the product pre-qualification or verification of the assets of the SPU, SPG. I will explain later what the differentiation between product pre-qualification and verification is, and grid pre-qualification. Since the grid pre-qualification is a process that is mainly conducted between the system operators, we decided to move this part into the title of system operator coordination. So that's not included in the title 3 on pre-qualification. Yeah, so let's have a look at the different articles. The first article describes the main requirements in the qualification for service providers, which is evaluated by the service provider qualifying responsible. So that's the counterparty that will check the capability of a service provider for a certain product. And then in the next article, there's a basic allocation of the product types into product pre-qualification and product verification. So the difference was already explained in the framework guideline provided by ACER, is that product pre-qualification is the ex-ante process. So the compliance of an SPU, SPG with a product is checked in advance before market participation, whereas for product verification, this is checked during the market participation. And yeah, for this Article 31 describes which product types are treated in which kind of way. So for standard balancing products, the process is the product pre-qualification, and then for all other types of products, the product verification, so the ex post process, is the respective process by default. But this Article 31 also describes certain exemptions as to when system operators can still conduct product pre-qualification for congestion management, for voltage control, and for specific balancing products. Then this chapter also describes in Article 32 the criteria when SPGs and SPUs need to be reassessed in terms of product pre-qualification or verification. So when SPUs and SPGs are significantly adapted, changed, controllable units are added or removed, then this article describes the criteria as when the system operator has the right to pre-qualify or verify these SPUs or SPGs. And last but not least, there's an article on switching of controllable units. This describes, on the one hand side, how switching between SPUs and SPGs of the same service provider can be conducted, as well as switching between service providers. So switching within the same service provider is quite freely possible. You just have to respect the criteria that we defined in the Article 32. And for switching between service providers, we try to facilitate and foster this switching as to avoid lock-in effects of controllable units to a certain service provider. Yeah, and now I would like to hand over to Georg to explain the technical aggregator concept.
Yep.
On the
Hello,
slide before.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Georg Hartner from Austrian Energy Association, co-leading together with Philipp the group on pre-qualification. And last point was switching of controllable units. It's a matter of customer sovereignty, of course. During the drafting of this first consultation version, we came across requests of different stakeholders requesting the definition of a role of a technical aggregator, and we decided to highlight what is meant by that concept. In reality, what Philipp has presented as controllable units need to be controllable by service providers, and in the initial versions of that code, we said, okay, here these controllable units can be controlled from within the premises of final customers. Now, reality is that a lot of flexible assets, may it be heat pumps or charging stations or whatever, are more or less using and utilizing cloud services often provided by the OEM vendor that provide the infrastructure to also make that these assets that are actually here for different stuff in the first place, then to manage flexibility. And that is why we introduced the concept of the technical aggregator, so basically a cloud or online-based service that can control or has a contract with the final customer to control these controllable units. Of course, Philipp was talking about lock-ins to service providers. We needed to be careful to avoid lock-ins to technical aggregators. So you will find some provisions in the definitions, but also in the switching parts to avoid these lock-ins for the future and ensure customer sovereignty. That was our main aim here. Next slide.
Yeah, I already tried to explain briefly the different concepts of product pre-qualification and product verification. Now the next two chapters are for these two processes to detail them more. For product pre-qualification, the overall principle during the draft was to simplify the processes So consequently, when for one SPU, SPG, the same product is delivered to different system operators, then these system operators need to agree on one party that is responsible to conduct the product pre-qualification process, so duplications are avoided. And yeah, in general, this chapter describes the tasks of this product pre-qualifying responsible. So the pre-qualification process mainly consists of evaluating the SPU's, SPG's capability to meet the product requirements and potentially conduct an activation test. And in this chapter, it's clarified when the product pre-qualifying responsible, that is the role that conducts the pre-qualification process, is allowed to conduct such activation tests. And we have foreseen further simplifications for small controllable units or mass-produced standardized devices. And yeah, furthermore, there are specific undertakings in that chapter to improve harmonization of the pre-qualification processes for standard balancing products. So first of all, ENTSO-E shall provide an overview of the different pre-qualification processes currently in place, and then there is an obligation to investigate further improvements in the harmonization. Yeah, also for the congestion management and voltage control services, the product pre-qualification process is described on a high level, which is aligned with the steps in the system operation guideline for balancing products. And then for chapter 7, product verification, I already explained that this means that there is a preliminary market access for SPUs and SPGs, so there's no ex-ante check of the capability, but the capability is checked during market participation. And that's the default process that is repeated here or clarified again for congestion management and voltage control products, as well as for specific balancing products. And yeah, the capability is checked by the product pre-qualifying responsible with the verification criteria. Since the products will be defined on national level and standardized on national level, it was difficult to draft in the legal text already the verification criteria. But if you have good ideas, valuable input for this verification criteria, that would be of help during the public consultation. Okay, next slide, please. Then Georg, it's your turn again.
So in articles, like in the requirements for flexibility master data exchange for pre-qualification, we have Article 39 talking about principles and governance for interoperability, and principles and requirements for data exchange in the pre-qualification phase. It was very important for us to regulate a digital scenario, because we all were aware that without a proper degree of digitalization, none of the requirements stated in the code are feasible. The challenge that we faced here is basically the integration into market communication environments and to write a code that is viable for the different setups that we will find in member states. As you know, as of Article 23 of the directive, energy data management organization is subject to member state decisions. We see in some member states that we have centralized connection point registers. In other member states, it's the connecting SOs that are managing these things. And what was important for us is to realize and prescribe a scenario that makes it easy for service providers and market actors and other affected actors to enjoy a single and common front or one point of interaction, standardized interaction with the master data management infrastructures, to register their controllable units, to register their SPUs and SPGs, manage the life cycle, and then in the background behind that front door, we had to set up clear rules and responsibilities to set up a flexibility register as an information system, ensuring that all data changes and updates end up at the parties in need at the right time. And here it is important to highlight that we see the flexibility register as an information system where that can have a multiplicity of platforms. We don't preempt which national actor is operating which platforms. We see member states going for centralized flexibility registers. We see member states combining existing responsibilities to a uniform decentralized flex register, and the code accounts for both main setups and actually also for more, which is a necessity to use what's there and make a good impact. And what we also had to take care about is the table of equivalencies and the fact that as a principle, a product pre-qualification responsible party should make available the results of their assessment to other pre-qualifying responsibles, to other requesting SOs, so that SPUs and SPGs that undergo a pre-qualification, a classification of the attributes for a given product, that these results can also be used by other parties and avoid, therefore, for service providers to undergo multiple pre-qualification processes just for different products. Next slide. As a matter like Articles 45 and Articles 46, so the last ones here in our group, I would say 45 deals with principles for the national implementation, national terms and conditions for service providers. As a matter of principle, we said that the NC draft strives really to eliminate unnecessary member state divergence to the greatest possible extent. Where member state differences can't be accounted for, there's other work streams that should take care of these things. What is also very important is the table of equivalence mechanism here. The table of equivalence is basically a list of products and comparable attributes between these products. Based on these comparable attributes and requirements that they state, these products become comparable in terms of their complexity, and it should be quick and easy for service providers to have their SPUs and SPGs classified once. And the aim is then that they just need to undergo qualification once. In future steps, we also foresee a European table of equivalencies that should provide more convergence and harmonization at a European level. Yeah, next slide. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Now we are coming to Title 4 and 5. We are Ivonne Ruaida and Olivia Alonso. I'm Olivia Alonso from Red Eléctrica, the Spanish TSO.
And I'm from Vattenfall Distribution, a Swedish DSO.
Thank you very much for being with us. And coming to the content, first thing we'd like to state is that market-based solutions are the preferred solutions for systems operators to solve congestions and voltage issues. And this is the principle for Title 4 on market design for congestion management and voltage control services. And in line with this, the first two articles of Title 4 set the basis for developing markets as the by default solution. Requirements in Article 47 mirror framework guideline provisions that say that when facing congestions, the system operators shall always choose the most economically efficient option or combination of options of the different tools at their hands in such a way that the optimization of social welfare is achieved. Besides efficiency, effectiveness, transparency, and coordination are also important criteria to be followed. Indeed, the application of solutions in operational planning timeframe shall be conducted in transparency and coordination and in line with a framework clarified in detail at national level. And social welfare shall be targeted when designing this national framework. The result shall be a framework efficient from power system perspective that can clearly guide us in the daily operation. And at this point, it may be of convenience to clarify that access and connection to the grid is not handled by this network code. If system operators are nationally enabled to connect more customers than supported by their grid capacity or their contractual agreements with overlying system operators, they will assess the effective and efficient solutions at their hands, as for example, non-firm connection agreements or procurement of services, and this in line with national applicable rules. Consequently, this draft network code requires effectiveness and global efficiency in the design framework, giving the tools to systems operators to take effective and efficient solution in operational timeframe. In line with this, Articles 47 and 48 introduce the list of main contents and principles applicable to infrazonal congestion management and voltage control markets that shall be developed in national terms and conditions, namely principles for procurement and pricing, principles for publication, for coordination and interoperability between electricity markets, and requirements to procurement system operators and to operators of local markets. It is of utmost importance to mention diversity in the national and more local context when preparing national terms and conditions. Indeed, market for congestion management and voltage control would benefit from an European framework that fosters them, but need to be fit for purpose and suit to the needs. In particular, national terms and conditions shall clarify roles and responsibilities, as well as concrete realization of the coordination between markets, allowing value stacking. If we move to the next slide, thank you very much. This Article 48 is also and mainly about how the national regulation shall be developed to further foster congestion management and voltage control markets. As already said, the status of existing markets is very diverse among the member states. In some countries, there are well-developed dispatching markets used to solve congestions and voltage issues. And therefore, system operators start with a common assessment and proposal if existing terms and conditions are compliant to this regulation and if they are effective and efficient to solve congestions and voltage issues. This common assessment is also on what development and update is needed in the national terms and conditions. System operator will deliver this common assessment for approval to respective national regulatory authority. A national regulatory authority shall, in line with the applicable national process, adopt, or if applicable, submit to relevant member state authorities a proposal for updating relevant regulation. Additionally, system operators shall commonly propose terms and conditions for the development of infrazonal congestion management and voltage control markets, in line with Articles 5.8, taking into account the result of the common assessment. It is of highest interest to underline that there is a differentiated process for the review of existing solutions used to solve congestion and voltage issues and the creation of additional markets through additional terms and conditions. At the end of that differentiated process, there may be differentiated terms and conditions, or there may be single common terms and conditions. This is so in order to promote swift development of terms and conditions and ensure legal certainty and efficient regulation. Further to that, the Article 48 provides that system operators are entitled to present common proposals to national authority to complement non-market-based national approach when that has been so decided by national authority.
So thank you. Next slide, please. The Article 49 describes the main principles for procurement and pricing for market-based congestion management and voltage control services. The principles shall enable participation of all resources, non-discrimination, technology neutrality, and the respect of confidentiality. The principle shall also ensure that the market process allows for matching in timely manner needs and offer, and therefore enabling an effective solution to grid issues. When so technically feasible, products can be defined in such a way that they can be activated for different purposes or for the same purpose in different grids. It is important to note that service providers shall only be remunerated once for the delivered product, still making value stacking possible through enabling participation on different markets. The pricing mechanism shall be efficient and fair, allowing variations depending on product, voltage level, and the horizon of the product contracted. The pricing mechanism shall also, when assessed efficient, allow differences between energy prices and capacity availability prices in capacity markets or in tenders. The submission of bids from non-pre-contracted providers shall be allowed in capacity markets. Article 50 describes conditions for tender procedures to enable not yet contracted or not yet installed assets to participate. Article 51 states principles for the interaction of congestion management products on the one hand and non-firm connection agreements on the other, ensuring that markets are not unduly distorted. When non-firm connection agreements are applied nationally, the grid user with non-firm connection agreement might be able to participate on markets. The Article 52 describes two different publication times, before and after market operation. The article requires the system operators to provide indicative publication on long-term needs and short-term that is useful for market participants before the market operation while avoiding market distortion. Minimum requirements for publication of market results after market operation are also described. The Article 53 on principles for the coordination and interoperability between local and other electricity markets sets criteria for market interoperability and coherency between all markets, wholesale, including balancing, and also local markets, while avoiding market distortion. The article also allows for reusing non-selected bids under service provider consent. Next slide, please. Article 54 and 55 address, among others, the requirements to ensure non-discriminatory behavior, as well as transparency and neutrality of procuring system operators and of operators of local markets. The local market operator shall be independent of who it is and be a fair actor, ensuring equal treatment of all market participants. In Article 56, there are provisions for functional requirements for local market operators, as well for a process for nominating them to be described in the national terms and conditions. The local market operator can be the TSO or DSO, which is procuring the services, either alone or together. It can be another TSO or DSO, either alone or together, or it can be a third party. The involvement of national regulatory authority in the nomination process is foreseen to ensure compliance with the requirements for local market operators. Revocation of local market operator nomination may be done by the national regulatory authority in case of non-compliance with the requirements. Article 57 describes the main tasks of local market operators, as well as other possible tasks that may be assigned or delegated to them. The main tasks of the local market operator are the processing of bids and facilitating communication between system operators and service providers to bring offer and demand closer to each other. So the next slide. Olivia, we don't hear you. You have to.
Thank you. With regards to Articles 58 to 60, they deal with the definition of congestion management products. In Article 58, a list of attributes for congestion management products is mandated to be commonly developed and published by ENTSO-E and DSO entity within 6 months after the entry to force of the network code. And ENTSO-E and DSO entity will review that list at least every 2 years, updating it on the basis of additional proposals of attributes declared by system operators. When defining at national level standardized congestion management products, systems operators shall use the attributes in that list. Congestion management products shall fulfill the specific needs of system operators considered in the area network topology, size, and predictability of the congestion or the market liquidity. National standardized products will be proposed as part of national terms and conditions referred to in Article 48, ensuring stakeholders' involvement through consultation, therefore transparency and non-discrimination. And NRAs may allow system operators to use additional attributes for a maximum period of 2 years. Day-ahead, intraday, or balancing products may be part of the list of standardized products for congestion management, and this will have its reflection in the list of attributes.
Thank you. Next slide. So Article 61 to 63 put together all specific provisions under which system operators are entitled to own and operate storages when these are not fully integrated network components. Article 61 states as a condition for system operators to start operating and owning such asset that market-based procurement by system operators did not result in delivering by service providers the needed services at a reasonable cost and in a timely manner. In particular, remember that Article 50 enables market participants to propose a new storage as a resource to help provide a service, for example, if not yet aggregated or not yet connected assets. And Article 61 develops all conditions and national regulatory authority scrutiny and involvement put forth in the Directive Clean Energy Package, Article 36 and 54, before allowing system operators to own and operate storage. In addition, Article 61 streamlines system operators' consideration to share their storage as a second-best solution to full system operators' ownership. Article 62 develops the rights and duties for shared ownership agreement from system operators and of third-party prospectives. Article 63 refers to the periodic reassessment, whether system operators should, 1, phase out system operators' activity and have them purchase the necessary services from third party, or 2, to keep system operators' storage activity. The article relies on 3 joint assessments. 1, whether third party are capable and willing to operate system operator storages and provide an adequate offer to system operators to take over such storages. 2, whether market participants are willing to provide the needed services to system operators, considering system operators would no longer operate or own the storage. Any offers from market participant are enabled, so it's technology neutrality, and offer from a third party taking over the storage or offers based on other flexibility resources. And 3, whether it is overall preferable for third party to take over system operator storage and for system operations to procure the needed services, or for system operators to keep their storage to provide the needed services. Finally, Article 63 streamlines the role of system operators and the national regulatory authority in these assessments and the phasing out of system operators' activity. So next slide, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Daniel David. I'm working in the Spanish DSO-E distribution that belongs to Endesa and Enel. I'm co-leading the subgroup number 4 with my colleague Robert Kelliak. I will introduce first. Good morning. I will explain the Title 6 about the distribution network development plans. This title develops the Article 32 from the directive, that is about the incentives to use flexibility at distribution networks. For who are not familiar in this issue, what are the distribution network development plans? Well, they are the process to identify future grid investments in order to identify these grid investments and provide information to the market participants in order to make the procurement of flexibility. How is this process working? Well, first of all, this process needs inputs. The inputs used by each grid operator, each DSO, includes scenarios. These scenarios should be coordinated because at the end we are forecasting a common situation for all of us, but not only coordinated between ourselves, but also coordinated and considering national energy climate plans, all the national environmentals and plans of renewables or demand response or whatever we have at national level. How is this working? This process includes a methodology and the criteria to see when we identify a future grid congestion or a contingence, how to see the assessment, how we should consider the procurement of flexibility, under which situations, and how this assessment should be done. We have included one article about the methodology and the criteria. Another important change for DSOs, this is a new relevant task, is that we should perform public consultations to stakeholders before submitting these plans to the regulators, not less than 6 weeks of duration, in considering not only the flexibility needs, also the procurement, everything explained there. We should include all the comments in this version sent to the regulator. And of course, the regulator may have the possibility to make amendments and make comments. In this process, this is another important novelty in this network code is that several years ahead, when these plans are made, is when the DSO observability areas are defined. What are an observability areas? These areas include part of the network that is not part of the own DSO. This may include grids from other DSOs or TSOs. These observability areas includes structural information about the grid characteristics of the elements of the grids, real-time information, historical information. So this information is very important in order to make the assessment about the future flexibility needs. Because as we will see in the next slide, please, you can change. What is a reality is that the same congestion and voltage issue might involve several TSOs and DSOs. And this is the key point that perhaps is one of that makes necessary to define a coordination. This is a challenge for DSOs, but also is a big opportunity for market participants, for all of you, because if the same issue can be solved with resources connected to different grid operators, this enables the possibility to define portfolio, to make groups of units, the units that have been explained by Philippe and George. These units can be made of clustering resources to different grid operators. So we are optimizing, and we think this is a barrier we should exploit. However, this market, from the market point of view, this is very interesting, but we need to have in mind that grid operators should provide always quality of supply and respect some operational procedures, because the grid has not an endless capacity to allocate flows, and we need to define some coordination rules. How are these rules defined? Well, through the limitations to the provision of these services, and they are defined into different steps. First of all, in the long term, when the grid pre-qualification process are done, they involve all the grid operators. These processes are made at the beginning when a unit wants to provide flexibility. So we need to see if the grid is able to allocate all the flexibility. And the result can be in three different. They can be approved, the request of the grid pre-qualification, not approved, or conditionally pre-qualified. Conditionally pre-qualified is another new point we have included, because we are not, we don't want to say yes or no, black or white. We think that conditionally pre-qualified open the doors to say you can provide flexibility, but perhaps in some peak hours you should not provide all the flexibility, or yes. So the idea is to better optimize and exploit potentials of flexibility. So in the short term, several day ahead, also close to real time, DSOs and TSOs have the right to set temporary limits, because things may happen in the grid. We cannot forecast everything. And the idea is that these limits can be provided to set some temporary limits. As you will see in the network code, we have defined criteria to set these limits. We have tried to minimize the number of these temporary limits. We are trying to be original in order to not set by default temporary limits. And this also should be reported to the regulator, so justified under which situations. And these coordination rules, as I said before, need data, need information. This information comes from the DSO observability areas. So we need DSOs and also TSOs more accurate information about what is happening in our grid and also in the grid from our network, because we need to make the forecast. We need to make more accurate forecasts. And this is now we go to the next steps, the forecasting and solving congestion and voltage issues. So as I said before, when the same issue can be solved and can be affect several units in different networks, well, this might involve several service provider groups and service providing units from different TSOs and DSOs. In this coordination, we also have defined the need to set who starts the process, who identifies the needs, who makes the procurement, and who takes actions to solve these issues. So there might be several agents, or perhaps it's the same, but different roles that needs to be better defined. At the end, there is another important point, is the need to ensure the system balancing. So when there is one activation of flexibility, there may be an imbalance that need to be solved, and it's important always to consider this, especially for the balancing processes. I give the floor to Robert, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Kierak, working for PSE, Polish Transmission System Operator. Title 8 of this network code deals with the data exchange requirements from grid users. It consists of 3 articles. In Article 78, organization roles, responsibilities, and quality of data are set. 79 regulates data to be provided by service providers, and 80 regulates data to be provided by grid users. Main concept of the provisions from this title is that it shall not replace but complement information exchange requirements from the service providing users and service providing groups that are significant grid users in line with another European regulation from 2017 called System Operation Guideline. The System Operation Guideline was implemented on EU level by approval by each national regulatory authority, terms and conditions called key organizational requirements, rules, and responsibilities, and by each member state, separate terms and conditions approved by national regulatory authorities. So we have two terms and conditions to implement this. And in this chapter's provisions shall mandate service provider that do not already have the mandate to provide information to the system operators according to the System Operation Guideline implementation. Network code requires that such service provider shall be responsible for providing adequate quality data and information to the system operator. However, this responsibility can be delegated to third parties. In this network code, also national terms and conditions for implementation are foreseen, and at national level shall be defined data to be provided by service provider and by grid users, and which data shall be exchanged and how. National data exchange requirements shall be established in line with the principle of limiting the request amount of necessary data for system operators to fulfill their task and therefore to ensure security of the system. Justification of the need for the data requested at national level shall be provided to the national regulatory authority together with the relevant terms and conditions for service providers. National terms and conditions shall determine the applicability, scope, and granularity of the data exchange to categories which are similar to System Operation Guideline. These categories are structural data, scheduling data, forecast data, and real-time data. And in addition to this, all data necessary for pre-qualification, for verification of service were relevant, and for performance of the activation tests. The applicability, scope, and requirements for data exchange shall be determined on the basis of the size and characteristic of the service providers, the voltage level of the connection of this service provider, and characteristic of the service. National terms and conditions shall define the process and format for data exchange with service provider in line with the existing interoperability rules. When defining format protocols for data exchange, system operators shall take into account existing available international standards. Next slide, please. In Title 9, there is only one article related to voltage control service with use of reactive power. I saw such question, and here there is dedicated title where we regulate the voltage control by using the reactive power. And previously in the titles related to congestion management and voltage control, this voltage control was proposed in the previously mentioned chapters and titles for regulating the voltage by the means of active power. Here, the title is about the reactive power. Basic requirement from this title is that system operators are responsible for reactive power control and voltage control in their own grid. When system operators identify that the mandatory requirement for the reactive power are not enough for voltage control in its grid, the corresponding system shall assess and quantify the additional reactive power needs. Then identify the potential solutions for those additional reactive power identify needs. And such solutions might be specific grid investment or procurement of reactive power in addition to the mandatory requirements. So based on such identification, system operator can define an action plan and then send it for the NRA for information and update, if applicable, relevant national terms and conditions for coordination. In the procurement of reactive power needs, market-based procurement is preferred. This might be substituted by rules-based procurement only when the solution provided by market-based procurement is not economically efficient. There is no market-based alternative available, or all available market-based resources have been used, or a number of potential providers is not enough to ensure liquidity and competitiveness of market-based solution. And at the end, technical attributes of products used for voltage control services shall be selected based on the list given in the draft in the Annex 1. If the list does not include necessary parameters needed on the national level, it shall be set on the national level individually. Data exchange from service provider to system operators shall include at least provision on data exchange detailed in this title, and data in the previous title, and data to monitor provision of the service. Data exchange from system operators to the service provider shall include at least a set point to provision of the service. Next slide, please. Title 10 includes 3 articles on derogations, monitoring reports, and harmonization. And derogation rules are similar to the ones used in the other existing network codes and guidelines. And monitoring reports, we have mentioned that Acer shall develop such monitoring report on the following matters. This is analysis of option for further harmonization on aggregation rules and aggregation models, analysis of good practices in ex-post verification process and ex-ante pre-qualification process, assessment of options for market-based congestion management, including products updated list of European attributes. So the goal is to harmonize attributes. Then procurement methods, overall market design for congestion management and voltage control services, stakeholder information and transparency on procurement, and activation process and system operators coordination. And at the end, last topic is analysis of option for market-based voltage control. In addition, European process shall be established and include European aggregation model with benefits and drawbacks for each type of aggregation models, product verification process and product pre-qualification process, in particular, the identification of cases where product pre-qualification can be replaced by product verification, as well as simplification of these processes, requirements and activation tests where applicable, including specific simplification for small controllable units and standardized devices. Options for market-based congestion management, including products, updated list of European attributes, procurement methods, overall market design, and system operators coordination. And also mitigation measures to prevent gaming in local markets and their effectiveness. And at the end, description how to catch up effect are considered. Such process shall start 3 years after entry into force of this regulation and be repeated every 3 years. The national implementation of regulation shall be analyzed in European monitoring report for each of the areas listed on the slide to map the national implementation status with the description of implementation options and potential recommendations. Based on such reports, a proposal for methodology of further harmonization areas shall be developed jointly by the ENTSO-E and EU DSO entity and submitted to ACER for review and approval. Next slide, please. And the last but not least, transitional and final provisions, which are pretty similar to the one used in other existing network codes and guidelines. Probably most important is that the regulation shall enter into the force on the 20th day following the publication in the official journal of the European Union, and then comply with the requirements of this regulation, the relevant clauses to comply with the requirements of this regulation, the relevant clauses in the contracts or general terms and conditions have to be amendment within 3 years after entrance into the force. Yeah. That was the final slide. Thank you, and I'm giving the floor back to the leaders. Thank you.
Thanks to everybody who was presenting. I've seen that we have quite a few questions in the Q&A section already. Fabio and me will try to sort these now. That's not an easy task. We can, of course, we'll probably address those and distribute your thumbs up. We'll probably address those with the most thumbs up. At the moment, there are only a few that have 1 thumb up. But if you want to promote a question, I think it would definitely be a good idea to support it so that we really pick up on it. As a starter, I've seen multiple questions on national TNCs, terms and conditions. What are the deadlines for submission? How will they be drafted? Who's responsible for that? And then there are multiple questions. For example, will each member state be able to select the definition of the operational limit? Article 47.2. Can one member state do it like that, do it like this? Maybe these are general questions on TNCs. We do, and I'll hand over basically to Paul and Zhao. They'll explain how national TNCs are devised, and maybe it's also Yvonne and Olivia. What we do have indeed is coming from the framework guideline. There are 4 different kinds of national TNCs specified. So yes, this network code will have some scope for adaptation to national conditions. And I think that's a vital component in the thinking of the framework guideline. The framework guideline doesn't want complete harmonization of everything. They want a careful balance between a European framework in the network code and then the member state implementation in the national TNCs. And I think given the fact that we have different conditions, that we have different challenges, that we have different maturity of markets, this also is a wise decision to delegate at least those points where it is should be done to the national level. However, it's always a balancing act. Yeah, it's not to be if we delegate everything to national TNCs, we basically don't need a network code, and we have to carefully evaluate, of course, together with our stakeholders and with all of you and your input to public consultation on what exactly needs to be harmonized in order to unleash a dynamic potential that leads to the provision of more distributed flexibility, but also on the other hand to look at what is there in the member state. Would somebody from you, I think it's Yvonne and Olivia, maybe elaborate on the process how national TNCs are devised?
Was it on the process? I think we actually, if we can show the slide again that we showed before, or was it on the timetable on the national TNCs? Yeah, and it's the, if you go back, go up. No.
The specific question was about the deadlines, the timetable, who submits it, what happens when, and so on.
Okay.
For the specific terms and conditions pursuant to Article 48 or in general? Because
this is a question in general, and then there's a specific question on the content of 47.2.
Yeah. Okay,
So
because
in general,
it is more to João than.
I can answer for the general question. It depends on the terms and condition itself. In each terms and condition, we will set the deadline for each. The 3 terms and conditions we mentioned in Article 7 will have its own deadline. So that is when the system operators will develop the proposal for the national terms and conditions. It depends on the terms and conditions.
Maybe you could elaborate a little bit on the general process for the terms and conditions on this. Maybe it's good to mention that the first step is to develop how TSOs and DSOs work together. Maybe in some member states that's already clear, but not in every member state. So the first step is to devise a procedure for that. That's the first step. That's the national process to develop national terms and conditions. Probably not needed in all the member states, but some member states. It's good to mention that it is a joint proposals for all systems operators. So it's TSOs and DSO to jointly propose such a process. Then in the common national terms and conditions, it's also stated that you have to do that together as DSOs and TSOs. And then the approval is, of course, by the NRA. There's also a stakeholder consultation as part of that. And then, of course, it depends a little bit on the topic, when the timeline of it and when it is submitted. But that's a little bit the whole process. So first a proposal for how to work together, and then there are the different terms and conditions that has to be delivered by the TSO and DSO. Hopefully
in fact, if we want to have more detailed information about that, it is that first, as Paul said, system operators have to jointly submit to the NRA a proposal for a national process to develop TNCs, and it is by 3 months following the entry into force of this regulation. And then the NRA will have 1 month to revise after consulting all system operators and approve it. And then all system operators will develop the common proposals with timeline for implementation for national TCs within the respective deadlines set out for each type of terms and conditions. And then the competent national regulatory authority shall take decisions concerning the submitted national terms and conditions within 6 months following the receipt of these national terms and conditions. That is the whole process.
Yeah. And also there are some union-wide or European terms and conditions or methodologies foreseen. That's also part of this. And there's also approval. As Joe also mentioned in the explaining it, there's also a consultation period foreseen in that.
Absolutely. Part. Yeah. The consultation period for the national TCs or for the union-wide TCMs will last for a period of not less than 1 month. The national TCs at the national level and the union-wide TCM, of course, at the European level. Yes, and when the two associations for the European TCMs will develop the union-wide TCMs, the agency, ACER, shall take decisions concerning the submitted TCMs within 6 months following the receipt of these TCMs. And in the event that the agency, ACER, requests an amendment to approve the union-wide TCMs, the two associations shall submit a proposal for amended TCMs within 6 months following the request of ACERs. And then ACERs will have 2 months following the submission to decide and approve those amended terms and conditions.
So hopefully this answers a little bit the questions.
I think quite well, into depth. So as you can see, I mean, Thorsten was mentioning this, there is a lot of European framework provided in this network code or in this proposal for network code, meaning that, yes, we will develop national terms and conditions, but they have to follow a common plan, a common timeline, give a common responsibility to TSOs and DSOs in each member state. And all this in some member state is actually new. This is not existing. And this will, I think, give a good push towards the creation or towards unlocking this distributed flexibility, which is getting larger and larger every day. I think I've seen a question which is related, but a bit more high level. Is basically, how will you ensure that TSOs and DSOs will actually adopt and implement this regulation? Well, the answer is in the question. It is a European regulation, so it's not a directive. It doesn't have to be transposed. It enters into the force, and then you are obliged. The member state is obliged to implement what's written there. Otherwise, you're infringing European law. In the same way you're infringing other regulations. So of course there is, once this enters into force, and again, we are not at this stage because we will finish a draft, hand over to ACER, ACER will hand over to the European Commission. But once this enters into force, it's valid immediately. We are obliged to implement this, and this will, again, from our perspective, give a huge push towards the creation of these local flexibility markets, and also to give a European framework. Of course, the details will be developed in this national terms and conditions, because, well, we are in a phase where it is important to take into consideration what's happening on the ground. But still, they will follow article by article, paragraph by paragraph, this framework that we have set up in here. So I hope this closes a bit the question about the implementation and national terms and conditions. I think I've seen a lot on aggregation models. Maybe we could pick one of those. Also seen something about the correction of sub-meter data who will do this? The aggregator, the system operator, the consumer. Yeah.
Paul is on screen. He's probably the one for that.
Yeah, but which specific question? And also Yao, of course. But do you have a question in mind?
So I will read out one which has been upvoted. Is whose responsibility will be to correct the submeter data? System operator, aggregator, or consumer?
Okay. For the submeter or DMD, there's an assignment of a meter data administrator. This is the same meter data administrator as the which is mentioned in the implementing regulation for metering and consumption data, for the data interoperability of metering consumption data. We refer to that implementing regulation. Therefore, the meter data administrator is responsible for the correct values of it. Normal procedure also for all metering data is that there is some validation by the system operators of the meter data. But in essence, the meter data administrator is responsible for filling the gaps, or if it is really strange values, extreme values, to filter gaps, or sorry, to filter extreme values, or to fill gaps if they are occurring in a metering in a series of meter values. So there's a special assignment to a market role for meter data administrator. This role can be picked up by different parties. It can be a third party, but it can also be a system operator, or yeah, that's a little bit, it depends on the member state who is acting, who can pick up the role. And then of course, for different devices, I can imagine that you have different meter data administrators, specifically if it's something like, for instance, EV charging, then it is possible that the producer of the, for instance, Tesla, if they are also certified as meter data administrator, because they have access to the meter data of that device, because it's really difficult for instance, a system operator to connect to all the different possibilities of heat pumps, EV chargers, and all kinds of devices. It's almost impossible to have, if there's no standard in place, it's almost impossible to have to access that data. Yeah, that's a little bit hopefully the answer to the question. Zhao, do you have anything to add here?
I think you have very well answered the question.
Maybe a little bit too long.
I hope so. I hope so.
Sorry.
Thanks to the two of you. Scrolling through the questions, I have one from Alicia Carrasco from the Spanish Association ENTRA. It says that there's a need before modifying or creating new TNCs, there's a need of an assessment of whether the current market framework work efficiently. And she says, well, this could perhaps be further explained, and in which cases there will be something new, in which cases there will not be something new, and she's asking for a clarification. As this is one of the central elements, I think a clarification from Olivia and or Yvonne would be nice. Thanks. Olivia, Yvonne.
Apologies. The question is with regards.
The question is, I read it out. During today's presentation of Title 4, it was mentioned that before modifying or creating new TNC, there's a need of an assessment of whether the current market for congestion management and voltage control work efficiently. If this is the case, there won't be a need for doing anything else. Is the DSO procurement considered as part of such markets that work efficiently? The fact that markets work efficiently, it does not mean that they need to continue operating the same way without active procurement of DSO. And then she says, okay, could you clarify, please, in a comment?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yvonne, shall I start again?
Yeah, you can do it, Olivia.
well, I think the proposal for reviewing existing markets is not against the improvement or the creation of markets. It's really to take into account the well-established and developed markets today, and whether if they are compliant with the network code, they are effective and efficient, and what can be updated if so needed. And then in the Article 48, you see that additionally to that, there is the mandate to make common proposals for the development of congestion management and market control services. The intention here is to provide legal certainty on the existing markets, for sure, making them evolve in line with needs and efficiency, while promoting creation, development of additional new markets, if so decided at national level. So indeed, there is a strong intention to push forwards the markets for system services.
I think if we have a follow-up, it's Sophia Norgran, who asks how this is interacting with Article 13 redispatch, and what is the difference with the redispatch and what we are describing, and how they interact with each other. Maybe you could illuminate a bit further on this one. I think it's closely connected, isn't it, to what we just replied to?
Yeah, there are in many member states redispatching markets already in place. They need to be assessed commonly pursuant to this Article 48, and the intention is additionally foster perhaps markets other than redispatching. We have been spoken about concepts that may be products activated before the ahead market, and the intention is then at national level, when this network code is implemented, making sure that the new products and the new services interact well, coexist, and are consistently operated together with their redispatching markets, ensuring operational security.
Can you also, perhaps, Olivia, just develop what redispatching is, so it's clear? Because I'm not sure everyone is very familiar with Article 13.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Yvonne. Well, to me, redispatch is upwards, downwards action of implying a change in the daily or intradaily market positions for solving congestions or ensuring system security. And pursuant to Article 13 of electricity regulation, this may take a market-based approach or a non-market-based approach when so decided after assessment by authority. Yeah, so in my view, redispatching markets, of course, are congestion management and voltage control markets, right?
So thanks for that one. Maybe Fabio has another pick, but before that, I would encourage also all the subgroup leads to go directly into the Q&A section, and you can reply. If there are simple questions, such as how's this understood or that, you can basically answer these questions directly, and then maybe that's helpful for the one who asked these questions. Have a look, see what you can do. I'm sure it's helpful for the people asking the questions. Fabio, do you have another one?
Meanwhile, let's engage also subgroup 4. I'm looking at the upvoted questions. Says, why is chapter 9 only about active power for voltage control? Reactive power is more useful for voltage control than active power. So why have we disregarded this? Danny and Robert, would you like to respond?
Robert, if you want. Robert, if not, I think Robert.
Yes. I think I already answered this question. I mean, both tools can be used to regulate voltage, and in that chapter related to congestion management, there is an option to use active power to control voltage, and there is dedicated title, voltage control, with use of means of reactive power. So both means can be used based on this network code, and both can be used based on the market-based solutions. I hope that answers the questions. Thank you.
Very well, thank you. And then I'm going through the other upvoted questions. I think it's Peter Wibberley asking paragraphs, something of title 4 states that the network code aims an efficient use of demand response by facilitating the creation of markets for congestion management and voltage control services, which should be interoperable with existing markets. And his question is, rather than creating new markets, why can we not provide for demand response to participate in the existing markets? I think that's also a question to Olivia and Yvonne, maybe.
Many questions to Olivia and Yvonne. I would have another pick. So you guys probably you should stay on screen.
We were trying to we were trying to draft directly as answer to the question, perhaps to.
Okay, so you're responding in written form. Perfect.
If you want that, but because we are seeing a lot and we are reading, and so but no worries to answer orally also. So can you repeat the question, Fabio?
Basically, he was asking why is there a need to create new markets for congestion management and voltage control? Would it not be better, more efficient for demand response to participate in the existing markets?
I think it differs a lot in different countries. Also, I mean, we are supposed to further the creation of local markets for congestion management and voltage control that is intrazonal. And we are supposed to do it in a way where it will be, something that happens soon. So the way forward will look a little bit different in different countries. And I think the system operators have to, depending on the status of existing markets, but also the status of which problems do you have to solve and what kind of development do you need by having data exchange and these kind of things, what is the most feasible? So I think it will be a discussion on the national level, how the way forward will be among the system operators.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Totally agreed. Perhaps if I may complement, when I saw the question, I realized perhaps it was in the whereas. The way we express the whereas was interpreted by the one raising the question in the form that we were limiting the participation of demand response into the existing, which is not the case at all. We can improve the text right there to avoid this interpretation. Of course, this will not be the case.
I mean, probably the easy answer would have been one does not exclude the other.
Exactly. So yeah,
no, they don't.
In fact, okay. So I'll
there
pick
are lots
another
of questions on for you also on the relationship between market-based solutions, between non-firm connection agreements or flexible connection agreements, between rules-based, where is the border, what does one provide for the other, how did you specify that? Could you maybe elaborate a bit more on that? I think there are 2 or 3 questions on that. You're smiling.
Yeah. Yvonne, would you or shall I?
You can do it, Olivia.
Okay. Well, first, we'd like to recall that the applicability of non-market-based redispatch may be stated as part of the national framework. The non-firm connection agreement may be also a measure. We need to acknowledge that. Still, it may be of interest to comment that eventually the form of non-firm connection agreement may vary between member states. In some member states, non-firm connection agreement take the form of obligation for the grid users to participate in the markets. In any case, how we understood our mandate in the network code is for in the case of non-market-based, non-firm connection agreements, the network code should ensure the applicability of this tool in a context and together with market-based procurement. For instance, by when technically feasible, and so decided allowing the participation of grid users affected by non-firm connection agreements into market-based procurement of services. And therefore, the network code has an article in this regards that, in line with framework guideline, mandates national terms and conditions to clarify the use of non-firm connection agreements and procurement of services when those coexist in such a way that market distortion is avoided.
I would also like just to add, Olivia, that Article 13 is applicable for all up and down regulation, and how it's regulated either through then market-based by Article 13 or rules-based nationally, if the NRA has decided, is something, that, I mean, Article 13 is applicable in the operational situation.
Indeed.
We will write written answers.
Yeah.
Okay, I see, to put maybe also subgroup 2 a bit on screen, Georg and Philip, I see some questions related to you. Maybe one is very quick and can be answered directly. Why can't wind turbines be a service providing unit? The other one is probably a bit more interesting to explain again. When are these resources exempted from the ex-ante pre-qualification?
Okay, then Philip, I will take the first one if you don't mind. I think very easy to answer. The question was whether a single wind turbine in the slide, maybe the PMOs can switch over to the slide. Why can't that be a controllable unit? Yep. Here in the example that Philip showed, the blue boxes show the technical resources. They are combined, the three ones, into a controllable unit controlled by the wind farm controller. This here is just an example. In fact, we don't intervene with the control structures on premises. So if the wind farm or if the owner or operator of these wind turbines decide to separate them, to make 3 controllable units out of them, then all 3 potentially being marketed by different service providers, then the code allows for this. So it's very flexible on that end. It just clarifies responsibilities and terminology and languages. So it's just a matter of an example, that it's an example here.
And the service provider in this case, on the right-hand side, the wind farm, the service provider could have also decided to apply for products only with the wind farm, with a controllable unit of the wind farm. But just in this example, it didn't decide so. So in this example, the service provider uses the biogas plant as an SPG to provide a certain product, and in combination with the wind farm as part of an SPG to provide a product. It's just an example.
Yeah.
And can you repeat the second question, Fabio?
It was about the exemption from the ex-ante pre-qualification. So under which conditions and for which products?
Was it the question, will this guidance give exemptions for DR for regular and standardized balancing resource pre-qualifications?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe you can
So
put it a bit broader. Again.
Yeah, okay. So there are no specific exemptions for demand response units. So if there are exemptions, it needs to be technologically agnostic for sure. And the clear default process for standardized or for standard balancing products is the pre-qualification, the ex-ante product pre-qualification. And for local products, for congestion management products, specific balancing products, and voltage control, it's the product verification. Yeah, exemptions, to go back to ex-ante product pre-qualifications, I would say that goes in too much detail and probably is not the core of the question. It's more the other direction, right? When units do not have to pass product pre-qualification but can do product verification. Yeah, for now there is no possibility for standard balancing products to do this product verification, but it might be decided on national level. Maybe we can think about an opening clause that on national level it can be decided in that way.
Thanks a lot. We've reached the limit of our time. I think we've had not only very valuable contributions from the subgroups, we also had a lively exchange as far as that is possible in this format, of course, with our stakeholders. I'd like to encourage all of you that are in this call to contribute to the public consultation. We'll take your comments into due account. We need your inputs because we not just, of course, we also have the drafting committee where many very important stakeholders are assembled, but we need the inputs of those of the community that we are basically also writing this network code for it. Of course, it's also for TSOs and DSOs, but it is also for you. And the whole purpose, as Fabio said in the beginning, is to mobilize the huge potential of flexibility that is there and to provide the right conditions for that. And we cannot do something that performs this task without your inputs. So the consultation is still open until the 10th of November. We are eagerly awaiting your comments. We'll digest them. We'll use them to shape the final draft that we'll submit to Acer in the spring of next year. And thank you for all your interest, all your participation, all your input that we are still going to receive. Fabio?
I think not much more to add. I'd like to thank you for joining and for actively participating. I think there are some interesting remarks already that we can take into consideration. But again, I encourage you also to support what Thorsten was saying. Contribute to this public consultation. This needs to be a joint exercise. This is a moment to express opinions in written form. There is a draft. It's much easier to comment a draft than to express high-level opinions. Comment on the text. I really encourage you to do this and help us all improving this and getting it to a good product that will hopefully soon unlock all this huge flexibility potential. Again, thanks for joining, and we can close the session.
Thanks, everybody.